Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to the discussion on test 4, which was centered on GS paper number 3. Friends, first of all, a couple of things. See, I know that continuously reading 5 days and giving the test on 6th day and then again to start for the next 5 day is little bit tricky, and as time is passing you might be feeling tired. And I also know this thing that 99% people might be finding very hard to follow this thing, but guys, please do remember that result is also only 1% or even less than 1%. The 99.5% people, they don't make the result because you know the how many seats are there into the exam. So please make sure that you are here into this 1% and not there into the 99%. See, these 99% are not the rankers, they are the bankers. Whose bankers? Bankers of the coaching institute, bankers of the landlords, on whose accommodation you are living, and all the people who have made the entire economy onto the UPSC. These 1% are the rankers. And trust me, they never have an excuse. The time is never excuse, the weather is never excuse, and anything is never excuse. See, there are only things in your life you can make the excuse to not to write, excuse to not to read, and all those kind of things. Or second is you can win. Both the things will never be going hand in hand. So please make a choice and make a very clear one, whether you will be the one who will be making the excuse or the one who will be carving the way in towards the victory. However, now coming back to our discussion, and now let's start with the question number 1. Now guys, question number 1, it is a pretty straightforward question which is directly asking you the merits and demerits of the privatization of railways. Now guys, we need to pick up the subtle hints into the question as which line we need to adopt. So guys, here the line will be neutral. And how we got to know that examiner wants us to write neutral? See, because there are two weights here. First is the question itself says that the privatization is something very compelling, and a second counterweight is the crown jewel. Now, though the entire statement gives a message that now no longer railway is that much important, but still the strategic importance do exist. So throughout your question, you need to be very neutral. And see, it is not always the case. Even into the critical analysis question, there could be the two ways. You could be entirely neutral, which you needs to be here, and you could be neutral but inclined against or inclined in favor. So guys, that thing you need to see onto the framing of the question, and I say that UPSC is very prominent here. Now, guys, talking a little bit about the railways, you know that the Indian Railways was one mighty force which helped the British India in its conquest. But at the same time, Indian Railways also acted as an integrator, as a synthesizer, as it brought so many peoples from different walks of life, having different language, different preferences together. And guys, in a way, India's freedom struggle became so massive because the mobility was possible, and such mobility was given by the Indian Railways. However, coming back to our question, so guys, Indian Railway is a crown jewel because in terms of network, Indian Railways is having the third largest rail network into the world. Then after that, it was prominent into the terms of haulage, in terms of cargo carrying capacity, because earlier as a prominent road network was not there, so railways were the principal evacuators of the raw material from hinterlands to the port as well as industrial belts. Now guys, whenever you give an intro, see, there are certain things which you can do. Either you can talk about a particular thing, for example the importance of Indian railways as we had did. Secondly, you can give a fact associated with that particular topic. You can give some facts with respect to the railways. And third way, you can actually write into the railways that why such question has been given. So guys, now taking up the third way, this question has been given because recently government had constituted a task force whose mandate is to give a blueprint as how more than 150 functions of the railways can be given to the private operators, and how 50 railway stations can be given to the private operators. Moreover, as you know that recently Tejas has been started, so after this thing the privatization calls are coming even more prominently. And if you are following the newspaper analysis regularly, then from last 2 days we are also seeing that the government has decided that licenses to the private trains will be given on more than 100 routes in India. So guys, all these things you could have put in your intro. Now guys, coming to the positives and negatives of privatization. See, first point of privatization is in terms of providing basic amenities and state of the art facilities into the Indian railways, because the experience of railways have been very bad, and as large number of people are dependent, giving the good facilities will be doing good to so many people. And guys, the private sector is run by the professional efficiency, therefore all the such thing is possible. Now, at the same time, the negative comes that all these premiumness come at a cost, and guys, there will be the kind of steep enhancement into the railway fares, and railway will cease to be the carrier of the poor people. Then second point is this, that guys, the accident into the railways are a very big problem, and these accidents happen due to the poor management of the rolling stock, poor track management, and due to the substandard services given by the loco drivers and all these kind of people. Now guys, the private sector, as it works onto the efficiency, professionalism, and much more advanced corporate culture, these kind of things could be minimized, and there could be certain reduction into the accidents. Now coming to the negative points, guys, there have been no empirical study that private sector had actually worked for the safety precautions, because at the end of the day we cannot forget that they are the profit driven enterprise, and whenever there will be the possibility of cost cutting, they will be intending to sacrifice onto the exit the safety mechanism. So guys, this is one kind of notion. Then third point is that guys, the private sector with its deep pockets will further enhance the infrastructure. And as we had discussed that today India has the third largest track length, it could further be enhanced. Railways has the infrastructure which is old than 100 years. That of infrastructure can be updated. Now guys, coming to the negative point. See, the infrastructure enhancement will be there, but it will only be onto those routes which are lucrative and have the potential of generating the revenue. So guys, further regional disparity will come, as the lucrative regions will get further better connectivity, and the hinterlands such as the interiors of Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha will be left behind, so it will create further anomalies. Then guys, we can take the example of the international experiences in countries such as Japan and USA. As the private sector entered into the locomotive business and the railways, the competition increased, and at the end of the day the people got the benefit. But onto the flip side, onto the negative side, guys, India is no like other country, and India's demographics, India's population, India's reliance onto the railways, and the per capita income of India is very much lower than the average income into these developed nations. So guys, what holds true here might not be holding true in India. So, in such a way, there are both merits as well as demerits. Now, guys, when we are talking about Indian railways, the privatization of railways has also been talked by the Bibek Debroy committee, which submitted its report in 2015. But guys, it did not talk about the outright privatization. Rather, it gave a gradual roadmap as how, into the balanced manner, certain operations can be privatized, but into certain instrumental and core operation, the monopoly of the railway should be maintained. So guys, Bibek Debroy committee could be referred here. Moreover, just 2 days back we had seen a third way, that is maintaining the railways wherever they exist, but giving additional licenses to the private sector. Whatever rolling stock the Indian government, the Ministry of Railways are having, they should retain that. Rather, additional capacity should be built, so that the ones who have the deep pockets, who can pay, can use those facilities, and the other could rely on to the government given services. So guys, into that particular manner we can write about this particular question. So that's, now we'll move to next. Now guys, question number 2, talks about Atmanirbharta, where it has been said that it is not a luxury, rather an economic compulsion for Indian economy into the wake of post-pandemic world. Steps that has been taken by the government, and secondly, do you find sufficient? Now, guys, two things you need to give here: what government has done and their evaluation. And in evaluation, you will be telling that what is good and what is bad. Now, see, turbulence is the new normal. The post pandemic world has forced us to back to basics kind of a philosophy. Now, guys, the 20th century was characterized by the phenomena of globalization, and at a point it was said that globalization is irreversible fact, that you can't undo the globalization. But such a theory has got a beating on the back into the aftermath of a pandemic. And in the pandemic, the people are now resorting back to their roots, and anti globalization has been characterized. And this thing can be seen by the relocation of industries from China to their home countries. Now, guy, coming back to the Atmanirbharta. So, Atmanirbharta is self reliance. And why the self reliance is very much important? Because when the anti globalization will start, the self reliance will automatically come from the back door. And into the aftermath of a pandemic, we had seen that the countries have struggled for basic things such as PPE suits, N95 masks, basic medicines such as hydroxychloroquine, paracetamol, and all these kind of things. And India had also not left untouched, and it gave us an opportunity that we should smell our coffee, that we look into our coffers, and we need to make an analysis whether India is ready to leap into the Asian century where India hails itself as a superpower. So, guys, the homework is not adequate. So, therefore, government started with the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, where a 20 lakh crore rupees fiscal package was given in order to build the self-sufficiency of India. So, friends, from here you will get ample of raw material which you can use into your introduction. Guys, please don't do it more than two or three or four lines maximum, because the main marks which you will be getting, it is for the body and not for the intro. Now, friends, Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan was a 20 lakh crore rupees package worth 10% of India's GDP, and was dependent on four pillars, that is, the reforms into the land, reforms into the labor, liquidity, and law. Guys, into four trend shape or into the four parts, the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan was announced, and it focused onto a large number of areas. For example, it focused onto the MSME sector, where the MSME revival package or revival plan was announced, and the support worth rupees 3 lakh crore was announced for the MSME. Moreover, guys, the definition of the MSME was also enhanced in order to give them the more venturing territory to the MSME. Moreover, the 50,000 crore rupees fund was also announced for the MSME, so that better operability can given to the MSME sector. After that, guys, if we talk about bringing the Atmanirbharta into the agriculture, various agricultural reforms were announced. For example, onto the interstate trade, the barrier free trade was given permission, and even government came with the ordinances in this particular direction. Then, guys, the legal mandate for the contract farming was also announced, so that farmers can get the better price discovery. Then deregulation was announced, and into this deregulation, the Essential Commodities Act was promised to be amended, and guys, even the ordinance has come into this direction also. Then, with respect to the infrastructure, investment of nearly 1.5 lakh crore rupees has been announced, which will build farm gate infrastructure and will give the support of the logistics to the agriculture sector. So, guys, two sectors we had seen: the MSME, the agriculture. After that, guys, we can go towards the advanced territory, and into the advanced territory, then reforms into the defense, mineral, space, aviation, power, and atomic energy will come, where the level playing field has given to the private sector, so that in India or inbuilt capacity of all these sector can be built. For example guys, in defense, FDI is being enhanced to 74%. Then guys, into the mineral exploration, the monopoly over the coal is being reduced down. Then guys, into the space sector, the private sector is being allowed, and even the in space has been created by the government. If you are following the newspaper, we had already done this also. Then into the aviation sector, the public private partnership model is being explored, and additional investment for the new airport is being carried. Then guys, into the power sector, the discoms are being privatized, and into the atomic sector, the PPP model for the atomic reactor is also being explored. So guys, all these things have been done, and it is much more than sufficient, much more than what you can write into your answer. Now guys, do you find them sufficient? Now, issue comes here that guys, due to the lockdown which has been announced and due to the pandemic, there has been substantial decline into the economic activities throughout the country. And right now, the need of the hour was to give something which can show the immediate impacts. But guys, under the name of Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, all the measures which have been taken are the long term. Moreover, guys, there is one more problem, that nothing substantial new announcement have been came. Rather, whatever government has done into the past, it has been repeated. Secondly, when we are talking about Atmanirbharta, how inviting more FDI into the defense sector makes us sense. Then guys, there is also the criticism that private sector is being enroped into the critical areas such as atomic exploration, and here there could be a problem if a little bit complicancy comes. After that, guys, if we talk about MSME sector, then whatsoever reliever has been given to MSME, it is into the form of loan and into the form of credit enhancement. But as right now, the condition of MSME is such that they are not finding any demand. So, what they will be doing with that credit? Because the credit will also be coming with the interest repayments, and that is not the capacity of MSMEs right now. So at this point of time, direct transfers to MSMEs could have made much more sense. And similarly, if we talk about the agriculture, then guys, the majority of thing which is being done is the legislative. And you know that in India there is no dearth, no lack of the legislation. Rather, there is lack of resources, lack of implementation, and on that particular thing, nothing has been promised. So there could be a possibility that Atmanirbhar could be a dream rather than a reality. So, guys, that was the critical analysis. However, at the end of the day, we will show a hope that still, by after all these things, India will be able to manage and will emerge as a major power into the entire Asia as well as into the world. So, that's all. Now, we'll move to next. Now, guys, the question talks about the liberalization of the coal sector, and it asks you to trace the major policy actions taken by the government. Now, as I told you, that you can start the question by in some particular ways. So, guys, here in intro, you can also write that the coal sector liberalization is being talked about because recently into the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, coal sector liberalization was specifically emphasized. Moreover, government is also shifting from the role of the miner to the role of the regulator, and in that direction, the coal sector liberalization makes much more sense. Now, guys, when we talk about the coal sector liberalization, we are just undoing the things which has been done into the past from the independence up to the liberalization of 1991. So, guys, before this, the coal sector was liberalized, and after this, the coal sector is moving towards the liberalization, and the 2020, the Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan, is just the culmination towards this liberalization. Now, guys, if we talk little bit about the coal sector, then originally the coal sector was the monopoly of the private sector, and there are large miners into the coal. However, after independence, government of India favored the nationalization of coal, and in 1972 and 1973, coal sector was nationalized by passing the Coking Coal Mine Act of 1972 and Coal Mine Act of 1973. So guys, for a very long time the coal sector was nationalized. However, things started to change in 2015 when for the first time government came out with Coal Mine Act of 2015. And by this Coal Mine Act of 2015, we opened up the coal sector for the private players. Now, guys, how the sector was opened up? It was said that the private players for the captive use they can take up the coal block. Now, captive use is use for your own end purpose. If you are making the steel, then you can have your own coal block from where you will mine the coal and will use it for the manufacturing of steel. So that was the captive, it was allowed. Then the next reform came in 2018 where the government decided that now we will be allowing the commercial mining of the coal. So commercial mining means that the private player without the captive use can also come and can take up the coal block. And at that point of time, it was decided that the coal will be given on the basis of bidding, and the bidder need to give money to the government onto the per ton of the coal that has been mined. So guys, this is the entire background which has happened till now. And now what government has decided, government has said that now they will be further going with the reforms. And now number one change is that they had talked about the revenue sharing mechanism. It means not onto the per ton basis, but whatever revenue is being generated, government will take a share into that. So now instead of a fixed rupee ton, which we had discussed earlier, in that place the revenue sharing mechanism is coming. And now the entry norms will be even more liberalized, and immediately 50 blocks will be offered to the bidders. So guys, these are the major changes or the liberalization which has happened into the coal liberalization into the recent years. Guys, apart from this also there are certain petty technical things, but we don't need to go into that with respect to the general studies paper. So that's all. And now let's move to the next question. Now guys, question number 3 is with respect to the migration of laborers that is occurring. So question says that optimum utilization and mobilization of resources is the most important priority for sustained economic growth. But due to migration of worker, there is a challenge into the human resource mobilization. Guys, for any nation's growth, we need the availability of the resource. Then we need to have the accessibility of the resource. Now, guys, when we talk that India has a demographic dividend, it shows that the availability of resources there and human resource accessibility is more important than the availability, and that accessibility is being provided by the migration of the workers into the urban centers of growth, the cities, the industrial belts, etc. But now as the lockdown started, the reverse migration started in India, and into the wake of this reverse migration, the human resource is still available, but it into the rural areas, therefore it is not accessible, which is the most crucial aspect. And now guys, into this particular background, we will be bringing the Make in India, which government is very ambitious about. As in Make in India, the thrust is onto the manufacturing sector, and in manufacturing sector the huge reliance is onto the laborers. And guys, into the absence of workers due to the reverse migration, there will be the problem in achieving the dream of Make in India, that is to enhance the share of manufacturing to 25% in the India's manufacturing sector. Now friends, see, if you have paid attention, the question is asking you to discuss. So into the discuss, you are little bit flexible into your approach. You don't need to follow any set pattern. Now guys, as we are discussing this particular matter, we will further go that various state governments, in order to rectify this problem, has taken various desperate measures. For example, the amendments have been carried into the Factories Act as well as into other legislation in order to force the migrant laborers to return back to their work of place, so that their accessibility and their utilization both can be carried. However, it poses the problem of the exploitation of the laborers and the workforce. Therefore, guys, much of a time it is not appreciated. Now, guys, coming back, the problem has been created, but we also need to talk about the solutions as what could be there. So, onto the lines of solution, we can give certain mechanisms here. First of all, guys, the safeguard of the migrant workers is secured by the Interstate Workmen Act of 1979. But guys, this particular legislation has many flaws with respect to the implementation. It has not worked as the expectations were there. And because of this thing, there are no proper social security nets for the workers, and in absence of them, they have returned back. So, guys, in order to solve this problem, the act needs to be further strengthened, and the guarantees should be given to the workers that they will be given all the safeguards so that their utilization can be carried and they can again be mobilized into the places where there is their requirement. Then, guys, the number two thing comes is that many a state government is also exploring that why they themselves don't utilize the labor into their own states, and in that direction various skill mapping skill schemes have also been started by the government. For example, the government of Madhya Pradesh has started the Rojgar Setu Abhiyan, where the skills are being mapped. Moreover, guys, government has also started Garib Kalyan Rozgar Yojana, where the skill mapping is being done. Guys, here 12 ministries as well as departments have brought together, and in 25 areas the work will be identified, and onto the basis of skill that work will be given to the laborers or the workforce. So, guys, in the state also the utilization is being talked about. However, friends, all said, we cannot overrule that there is urgent need of the workers into the industrial belts, into the industrial clusters, as they are entirely dependent onto their labor. So, guys, the mobilization into that region is very much crucial. And as I talked, that the safety nets are needed. Moreover, guys, it is high time that the labor laws and the labor codes which government had announced earlier, they should be again rethought so that the welfare of laborer on one hand and the efficiency of the industries on the other hand both can be preserved. So, guys, on these lines will be writing, and as I have told you that it is asking you to discuss, so you have little bit flexibility as the way which you will adopt. Now, friends, question number five, it talks that fiscal deficit has been an alarming matter in recent years, but it stands even more aggravated into the times of the pandemic. What exactly are the economic and legislative challenges posed by fiscal deficit, and also provide certain innovative suggestions to deal with the situation? Now, guys, first of all, fiscal deficit happens to be a problem. Okay, it has been alarming matter, fine, and is now even more aggravated. All these things will be coming into the part of our introduction, and here we'll be starting that fiscal deficit is the key parameter of our government's economic well-being, and even many a times it is used by the financial rating agencies in order to rank the credit rating of a particular country. So, in this direction, we had already installed the Fiscal Responsibility Budget Management Act in 2003, which listed a stipulation onto the government that they need to reduce the fiscal deficit. However, repeatedly it was delayed, and ultimately it was postponed into the aftermath of economic crisis of 2008 and 2009. However, guys, again the government instituted the review of the FRBM under the chairmanship of the NK Singh committee, and NK Singh committee brought the FRBM 2.0, where the new timelines were imposed onto the state government, and it was said that the fiscal deficit needs to be reduced, then the government debt needs to be reduced, and guys, there are the time listed targets into this particular direction also. And guys, it was said that by 2023 the fiscal deficit needs to be reduced to 2.5%, and for every year there are the targets which are to be achieved. Now, guys, if we talk about the present year, Then government is going on to the FRBM obligations, but the problem came due to the pandemic, and now government needs to carry much more expenditure in terms of the health infrastructure and health response. But at the same time, guys, as the lockdown was also announced, there are the no sources of revenue. Therefore, we don't have input, but the output has been enhanced substantially. Now, guys, these are the problem for both government, as that is the state government as the central government. Now, if you will see the question, then guys, here it is said that what exactly are the economic and legislative challenges posed by the fiscal deficit. So, guys, the legislative challenge is simply the challenge of the FRBM 2.0, where the targets has been given for every year and we are under the obligation. So, guys, it is a legislative problem. But on to the other hand, there is also the economic problem, and that economic problem is that if the public debt will increase up to a particular level, then guys, the credit rating agencies will degrade India. For example, recently Moody has even degraded India's credit rating, and we are just above the junk level. So guys, there will be the problem of resorting to higher debt or to higher fiscal deficit. So twin problems are there. And now from here we will come to the next part, that what are the innovative suggestions or what are the solutions for this thing. Now guys, this will be our conclusion way forward as well as the final part. So first innovative solution can be the escape clause, which has been provided by the NK Singh committee itself. Under the escape clause, into an event of public health emergency, war or any such kind of condition, government can breach the target by 0.5%, so therefore it could be resorted. After that, guys, there is also one more thing that could be done, that is the monetization of deficit. So whatsoever extra money is needed by the government, RBI could directly go into the printing spree. New currency could be printed, and from that new currency, new money, the obligations could be met out. Now guys, monetization of deficit is not resorted as it has many intended consequences, such as the inflation, a substantial increase into the liquidity, and therefore has not been resorted, but still it could be an option. Then guys, third could be the console bonds, which were started by the Britain during the time of World War. They had much larger maturity, like say 70, 80 years. So by these kind of bonds also, government can ask the public spirited wealthy individuals that they should subscribe to those bonds, and by that bond government can bring the money. And guys, in a case if we also go above the escape clause, then we can bring the halt into the FRBM altogether, as it has been done into the wake of financial crisis of 2008 as well as 2009. And guys, the last solution could be is that on to the lines of a PM cares, government can make a passionate appeal that people should come forward and should donate generously. Moreover, guys, the corporate social responsibility, etc., could also be utilized in the terms of enhancing the healthcare response. So, guys, these are certain things where you can go. That's all about this issue, and now we'll move to next. Now, friends, question number 6 onwards, they are the 10 marker question where your scope is very much limited because 150 marks is the limit here. Now, guys, into the question, there are two things. One is the sustainable development, and second is the green budgeting. However, guys, the major highlight will be the green budgeting, because from green budgeting, the question is going to the sustainable development. Please keep this in your mind. Now, guys, first of all, into the introduction, you can simply talk about the sustainable development, and after that, outrightly, you will only be going into the green budgeting. Now, when we talk about sustainable development, what does it mean? It is simply the growth trajectory which could be sustained, or a growth pattern where the development continues without compromising the resources for your future generations. Now, guys, when we talk about this future generation point, then see, every year there is an Earth Overshoot Day. This Earth Overshoot Day tells us that on what particular date we had consumed the resources which we have for that year. So, guys, this Earth Overshoot Day is shifting. For example, if it is in August, it means that by August we had consumed entire year's resources. And in 2019, the Earth Overshoot Day was on 29 July. So, guys, this is clearly not the sustainable growth, and therefore there is a need to preserve the resources, and therefore the sustainable developmental goals have also been adopted in 2015. But guys, there is a certain more things which could be done, that is the green budgeting. Now, before going into that, first of all, why green budgeting? So guys, sustainable development comes when three things come together, that is the social development, economic development, as well as the ecological development, and in between the sustainable development will come. So guys, the ecology or the natural resources or the conservation of nature is the most important pillar, and the green budgeting focuses on to the conservation of the ecology, ecological services, ecological resources. So therefore it happens to be an important parameter, important vertical into the sustainable development. Now, guys, simply the green budgeting is devoting the budget resources in every vertical but with an inclination towards environmental conservation. For example, into the agriculture, green budgeting means that subsidies are being given in order to promote the organic produce, in order to promote the practices which goes into the less exploitation of natural resources. Similarly, into the energy, green budgeting means that devoting funds for the renewable energy resources, onto the energy efficiency, onto the off-grid solar energy development, and all these kind of things. Then thirdly, onto the transport front, the green budgeting means that such kind of transportation system should be made which has lower ecological footprint, which has lower emissions, higher efficiency, all these kind of things. Then green budgeting in a term of tourism means that those tourism sites should be explored which might not be leading to the degradation of to the environment. Similarly, onto the water building, these could be the directions here. So guys, I hope that exploring these lines you'll be able to write a very good answer. So that's it. Now we'll move to next. Now the next question: idea of inclusive growth is nothing but a new wine in an old bottle. Guys, this question, I don't think it is difficult. It is a very straightforward question. It simply means that inclusive growth is an old idea which is now being presented into a new terminology. Now, guys, we talk about the Human Development Report, we talk about the Human Development Index, where the focus is being given onto the well being of every section. We talk about inequality, we talk about growth with the human face, downtrodden section, the welfare of the vulnerable ones. We are talking about the Gini coefficient, where we measure that how unequal a country is, and we say that all this thing is not desired, rather we need to bring all people together. Now, guys, such an idea is a new wine in old bottle. It means that from very long India had cherished these kind of things, and this could be seen into the philosophy of Antyodaya, which was given by Vinoba Bhave in terms of development. It also corresponds the idea of Antyodaya, which was given by the Mahatma Gandhi, and on these lines we had framed the directive principles of state policy into the part 4 of Indian Constitution, which talks about the growth of every section. You will see here that the development of labor, children, women, the deprived, vulnerable, everyone's growth has been talked here. However, as we are in GS paper number 3, we also will give one economic angle to inclusive growth, and this thing happened when the preamble of Indian Constitution was added and the socialism was added. Because guys, this type of socialism is not the communistic socialism which is there into the Russia, but it is the democratic socialism, where it has been said that both private and public will go hand in hand. Why they will go hand in hand? For the welfare of the people, for the welfare of everyone, for the welfare of the downtrodden. So guys, the socialism is also bringing the inclusive growth into the context of India. Then, guys, as after 1991 we moved towards the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, there also much sweeping focus has been given for the poverty reduction, for the unemployment reduction, and all these kind of parameters. So, again, if you will see, the keyword is discuss. And discuss means that you are flexible to adopt an approach. And now, guys, in inclusive growth, there are ample number of schemes. So there are schemes for the minorities, scheme for the poor people, scheme for the women, scheme for the vulnerables, disables. You can write how many schemes you want to write. I'll not restrict you by two, three, four schemes. So because the area is very much open-ended here. So guys, that's all which will be the key idea here. And now we'll move to next. Now, guys, this question talks about the low tax to GDP ratio, due to which the spending capability of India is very less. And now, guys, into the terms of low tax to GDP ratio, the problem is due to the government's ineffectiveness and certain structural problems. So, in a nutshell, what we have here, we have a problem which is the low tax to GDP ratio. We also have been told that what is the source of that problem. These are the two sources. So simply you need to comment, you need to provide your viewpoint on this line. Now, guys, the best way to start will be discussing that what do we understand by the tax to GDP ratio. So it means the proportion of revenue that the government is getting in comparison with the GDP of a country. So if your GDP is rupees 100 and your taxes are rupees 10, so your tax to GDP ratio is simply 10%. Now, guys, any country's spending capabilities depends on to the resource that it is earning, and the higher tax to GDP ratio directly reflects the higher resources. India's tax to GDP ratio stands between 17 to 17.5%, which is very much lower when we compare the average of the OECD countries, that is Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. For these countries, it is nearly 34%, or to be very precise, 34.3%. So, guys, India taxes less. Okay, this is a problem. Why this is a problem? Government ineffectiveness. What is the ineffectiveness? Number one, guys, the tax slab has been progressively increased. If you will see the per capita income of India, it is nearly 1 lakh rupees. But what is the minimum tax rate? You need to earn more than 2.5 lakh rupees, actually 3 lakh rupees, because there are other deductions also if you are entitled to pay any tax. But guys, if average our income is 1 lakh and the slab is 2.5 lakh, how many people are there who will never be coming into the tax net? Second problem is that the efficiency of tax administration is such that there are large number of violators who are evading the tax, and therefore the problem comes. After that, guys, comes the loopholes into the Income Tax Act of 1961. Guys, there are two terms. One is the tax evasion, other is the tax avoidance. So, guys, evasion means that you are simply stealing, you are not paying the tax, it is illegal, which we had talked into the earlier point. Now comes the tax avoidance. It means that systematically you are using the loopholes, the vulnerabilities, and end up paying the less tax. So, guys, there are large number of exemptions due to which the people at the end of the day they don't pay the effective tax, and due to this the tax to GDP ratio comes down. After that, coming to the structural problem. So, guys, the structural problem means the problem at the root level, and this problem is majorly due to the size of a parallel economy that is going into the India. You know that there is an entire shadow economy where the unregulated, untaxed transactions takes place primarily into the cash. So, guys, that entire sphere is not under the tax radar. Then the next point is that in India, the enforcement of tax, or the tax compliance, or the tax judicial mechanism is so weak that deliberately people don't pay tax because they know that the case will drag for so many years, and therefore the tax litigation policy is very weak and we need to work here. So, guys, these are the points associated with the low tax to GDP ratio, which happens to be a problem in India. And these are much more than the points which you are needed to write, even if a question of 15 marker comes on these lines. So, guys, that's all. And now we'll move to the next question. Now, guys, question number 9 talks about blue economy as a driver of growth, and then there are the opportunities as well as challenges. Now, guys, first of all, into the introduction, we will mention about the blue economy, and here we can take the definition from the World Bank, which says that blue economy is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improved livelihood, and providing the job security. And at the same time, the health of marine ecosystem also needs to be preserved. So, guys, this is the concept of blue economy. And as you know that India has such large coastline, more than 7500 kilometer, it makes a great sense to explore the blue economy into the context of India. Moreover, guys, the sustainable developmental goal number 14 also talks about the sustainable use of oceans and need to preserve the life below the water also. So into that kind of time, sustainable use of blue economy can be a major driver. Now, guys, first of all, if we talk about the opportunities for India, then, guys, International Seabed Authority had given the permission to India to explore the polymetallic nodules which are found into the Indian Ocean. And, guys, India is one of the first country which had got the rights to explore the polymetallic nodules. And from here, the journey to blue economy starts. Secondly, India's location at the crown of Indian Ocean makes it in a very good vantage point, and onto the lines of Hong Kong and Singapore, India could be a transit hub for the major shipping consignments that are going from Europe and West North America to the Asia. So, guys, here India can play a very important role. After that, marine resources in the way of a fishery, shrimps, and other such kind of marine creatures, India can make an entire new economy. Guys, remember the Japan has a major contribution from the fishing, and learning from there, government has also instituted the Neel Kranti mission, where the systematic focus is being given onto the fishes and other types of marine catch. So, guys, here there is one more opportunity. Then there is also opportunity onto the strategic front, as India could be a net security provider to the entire region, and in turn can reap the advantages of various favorable bilateral negotiations. So all these are the opportunities. Now, guys, if we talk about the challenges, then there are challenges. For example, marine pollution is a kind of thing which does not goes well into the conquest of a blue economy. And, guys, as India had taken a pledge under the sustainable developmental goals, there is a responsibility that India needs to preserve the marine ecology also. But, guys, whenever there will be the enhanced activity into the ocean, inherently the marine life will be disturbed. Second issue is associated with the climate change. As it will be aggravated, there will be the huge impact onto the coastal cities, and this thing has been said by the IPCC's fifth assessment report. And in that capacity, major coastal towns, industrial hubs, and the blue economy related activities will be seriously impacted. Then, guys, third thing is that India's track record has been such that India has failed to abide with the ecological balance. For example, the coastal zone regulations are very hard to abide. So, guys, the sustainability comes into a problem. And then there is a geopolitical challenge. Guys, we are still having the disputes with the Sri Lanka, as India's EEZ comes in conflict with the Sri Lanka's EEZ, and there are various disputes also going on to this particular front. So, guys, there are both things, challenges as well as opportunities, but at the end there could be the way forward by which India can balance, that is the using sagar, that is security and growth for all into the region. So that's all, friends, and now we'll move to next. Now, guys, question number 10. It says that India is on the cusp of demographic dividend window, but if not materialized properly, then it can rather turn in a demographic disaster. Examine what are the most lethal twin challenges which can render demographic dividend useless. So, guys, into the introduction, as I had said, that you can start with the keyword also. So, we can here explain the keyword, that is the demographic dividend. So, guys, demographic dividend is a window which is very much sensitive to the time. Demographic dividend is the benefit that a country will reap owing to the favorable demographic profile, that is more number of working population, more number of people who don't need the much of the care, that is more number of the independent workforce. Now, guys, India's average age is one of the lowest into the world, and at the same time, when India is reaping the demographic dividend, there is the aging population into the Japan as well as into the West Europe. So, guys, India has the much potential. It could be the workforce provider not only to its own endeavors but also to the entire world. But there are twin challenges. These twin challenges are nothing but the challenge of good health and the challenge of good skill. Into the skill also we can talk about the education. And into the aftermath of COVID 19, the challenge of health will further be aggravated. Guys, even today, there are far number of infant mortality deaths. There is large number of population which is malnourished. There are large number of people who are dying by the disease such as cholera, TB, typhoid, and all these kind of things. And guys, by this particular way, our demographic dividend is being wasted. So we need to enhance the spending onto the health. Right now we are spending nearly 1.3% GDP onto the health. There is substantial increase which is needed here in order to mitigate this challenge. Moreover, guys, in this direction you can also write the interventions that has been taken by the government. For example, the Ayushman Bharat Abhiyan, the national health program, and all these kind of things. Second is the skill and education. Guys, if there is workforce but they are not employable, they are not equipped, they will again be rendered as useless. So, guys, in this particular direction also, though government has started the Skill India program, but still much need is needed to be done here. On to the education also, the gross enrollment ratio, the numbers of training institutes, vocational institutes, ITIs, all these kind of things are needed to be enhanced. So, guys, this will be the entire orientation into this particular answer. So these are the twin challenges which are needed to be addressed. You are very well that you can go into the way forward, but guys, the scope and the marks doesn't justify you to go into that particular territory. So, friends, this is the entire overview or entire framework for the paper. I hope you have liked it and you will implement the suggestions which I have given into your next test. Thank you so much.